Well, here we are with the 1967 Olds Delta 88 that we'll take for a nighttime drive. 1 year only front end, kind of Tornado-esque. The next year olds would go to the split grille. This is a Delta 88, not a custom, it's a Delta 88 Holiday Coupe. The custom would have another set of taillights in the bumper down here. Listen to that beautiful 425 rumble. Let's go for a ride. All right, well, here we go for a nighttime drive in the 67 Olds 88. This car has the low compression, no cost, 425 cubic inch V8 that made 300 horsepower. It's got a 2-barrel carburetor. Standard in this 88 was a 425 premium fuel V8, made a little bit more, made 310 horsepower. And then you could get two optional 425s. You could get a 365 horsepower 425, or you could get a 375 horsepower Starfire 425. So quite a few different options. Well, this car has the no-cost economy engine. I love the turn signal on this car. I bought this one probably 3 years ago, and you can see it's got 15,000 miles on it. And it's a really simple interior dash, but very elegant with the faux wood grain. It looks actually pretty convincing. Very simple theme. I love these buttons for the HVAC. I mean, listen to this when you push it. It just sounds so quality. These General Motors cars from the mid and late 60s, I think, is really GM's pinnacle. This car is just about flawless in so many ways in terms of how it drives. If your objective is to get a big, comfortable cruiser, this engine is so smooth, smoother even than later Olds engines. And this was the last year for Olds' 425. It would get enlarged in 1968, become the 455. And then that would have 3 model years where it was a premium fuel engine, 1968, 69, and 1970, before it would go low compression in 1971. And the Olds 455 would last through the 1976 model year. After that, the largest Olds V8 was a 403 cubic inch V8. And then the last Oldsmobile source V8 was the Olds 307 cubic inch engine that was still under hood in the Cadillac Fleetwood Bromes in the 1990 model year, in the early 90s, and powered like the Oldsmobile custom cruisers. It lasted a long, long time. I believe it was General Motors' last carbureted engine that they produced, and one of the last carbureted engines sold in North America. I think a Mazda pickup had a carbureted engine 1 or 2 model years after that, but certainly was General Motors' last carbureted V8, and I think of the domestics, the last carbureted V8. The Olds 307 is a nice engine. It just doesn't have much horsepower, and it was especially taxed in motivating station wagons and Olds 98s and things that, I mean, it's just so much nicer when you've got a 425 under hood like this car does. I love the glow of the gauges at night. Just kind of a soft glow, and then the lookout over the hood. These cars are just so special to drive them in various settings. Olds actually, during this time period, it got a reputation as being an old person's car, but under divisional manager John Beltz, he was really trying to invigorate the division with cars that appealed to younger buyers. So much so that in the late 60s, they had a campaign talking about Olds Young Mobiles, they called them. It didn't necessarily work all that great, but I think it did bring new buyers into the Olds showroom, And a lot of buyers certainly came in once the Cutlass gained in popularity. And that started really in the 1968 model year through 72. And then the Cutlass was redesigned in 1973, and it just took off for many years after that. But Oldsmobile was really hitting its stride at this point and all through the late 70s, and then it just really lost it in the late 80s as they introduced the new Tornado in 1986 that was, I thought, a really good looking car, but just not a successor to the 79 to 85 Tornado. And they also introduced the W car, the Cutlass Supreme, in 1988. Again, something that I thought was a really attractive car, but it replaced a vehicle, a rear-wheel drive Cutlass, that wasn't the same buyer for that front-wheel drive, very glassy upper Cutlass with a spaceshipy interior. It just was too much, I think, for the traditional buyer that was purchasing those cars at that time. I mean, imagine somebody who's driving one of those rear-wheel drive Cutlass coupes comes in and they want to buy something new, and they walk into the dealership to trade their car in and ask, well, what can I buy and what's out there? And the salesman points to that front-wheel drive 88 Cutlass Supreme coupe. I just don't think the sale is going to be evident. Somebody who loves a rear-wheel drive classic looking car pivoting to a front-wheel drive super high-tech, although very good-looking car, just, it's a tough putt. And the front-wheel drive car would have cost considerably more too, so I think the buyers just kind of eschewed them for that reason. But John Belts was the engineer behind the 1966 Tornado and its front-wheel drive system. He was Olds' chief engineer, then he became the divisional manager. Sadly, he died of cancer, I believe at age 43 in 1972 or 1973. And you can kind of see Olds turn and pivot from being the somewhat sporty luxury car to just being more of a luxury car. And it worked for them. But this Oldsmobile, the 67 Oldsmobile, it's interesting to compare it to the Pontiacs of the era. Pontiac advertised sportiness, but to be truthful, this Olds has a stiffer suspension setup. And I took a look, I have all the AMA specifications for these cars. I looked it up one time, and the Olds has about 10% stiffer spring rates and a bigger stabilizer bar in the front than the Pontiac. It's actually about the equivalent suspension in terms of stabilizer bar diameter and spring rates as the heavy-duty suspension was on the Pontiac. That's what the standard suspension in the Olds is. So they really were set up to be more sporty, despite perhaps the clientele that typically bought them. But I will say this car, especially compared to anything today, I mean, this is a really not a great road, and tons of expansion joints and frost heaves. And inside the cabin, this thing is, you hear a little noise, but it's very, very pleasant, easy to go over. This engine, the General Motors V8s of the 1960s, it is just so hard to beat. I don't think that, I know that I love my Fords and love my Mopars, but from my perspective, if you want to pick a GM engine in the mid-1960s, especially a big block, it's pretty hard to beat one of those for power, smoothness, and GM had really good carburation as well. Ford's carburetors, the 2 barrels were really good, the 4 barrels were not. Chrysler was always buying somebody's 4 barrels. Sometimes they had Holly, sometimes they had Carter. The Carters were really good. Carter AFBs were especially good, and Pontiac even used those in the mid-60s. Excellent carburetor, the Carter AFB or aluminum 4 barrel. In any case, hope you enjoyed this drive in the 67 Olds 88. One last look at the gauges. Thanks again for watching. Until next time, take care.